September 24th, 2015. This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon. And tonight we have as our special guest, best-selling author Karim El Koussa, who will discuss his factual-historical book, Jesus the Phoenician, and his Dan Brown-style thriller, The Phoenician Code. Karim is in Los Angeles on a lecture tour. He'll be speaking and book signing at Glendale Masonic Center on Sunday the 27th. Now, we have reviewed Jesus the Phoenician on a previous broadcast, and Karim honored us by quoting our review on the back of the book jacket of his hardback version of Jesus the Phoenician. So please join us for an hour of surprises, such as there was no Nazareth in Jesus' time, and Bethlehem was really in Galilee. And most importantly, Karim confirms what we have been saying for years. Jesus was the son of El, not Jehovah. So tune in with us and get the gospel Phoenician style. Karim, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you, Poke. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, well, glad to have you, and we're honored to have you. And you know, what I would like to start off with here, so our listeners can really get a handle on this, is we mentioned, and I just mentioned in the abstract here that Jesus was the son of El, not Jehovah, and we've discussed on previous broadcasts that there are really two versions of the Bible that are blended into one, which was one of the things that Ezra accomplished, as we know. And one version is the version that we call the lowest version of the Bible, and then the other one is the Yahwehist version of the Bible. And what Ezra did, as we know, is he took both versions and blended them together and just stuck Yahweh, and everywhere else showed up, he put Yahweh in there, and to try to Jehovah-ize the whole Bible. So what apparently you are suggesting in Jesus the Phoenician, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that way back, perhaps inspired by Akhenaten, a Phoenician-Egyptian connection, which was a considerable connection in those days, that a monotheistic religion actually developed in Phoenicia. And with the idea that El, or El Elyon, was the one God. Now, whether or not the rest of the Phoenician pantheon were subsumed in El Elyon, I'm not sure. Maybe you can answer that for us. But that El Elyon, that is actually the origin of the lowest books in the Bible, and including the book of Enoch, which was also Canaanite. Now, and so Jesus was definitely a Galilean, and he was certainly in the lowest tradition, and as was stated in Hebrews. He was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, and Melchizedek was certainly in the lowest. Now, is all that is what I've been saying pretty much lined up with what you're getting across, or have I made some errors here?
No, exactly. What you're saying is right, is correct. Now, we have to understand something, that the Old Testament has been compiling many narrations from different civilizations like the Phoenicians and the Egyptians and even the Mesopotamians at a certain point. And the Old Testament was following a certain propaganda, basically by a propaganda that was performed and exercised by the Persian Emperor Cyrus II. To go back to 2,000 years before that time and claim that Moses and the patriarch have existed at a certain point in history is mere illusion. There is no proof whatsoever considering their existence. Now, if we're going back to the idea of God, the Father of all, as been mentioned in the Phoenician theology and religion, we understand that this name is the Father of all gods, and there is a pantheon of gods in the Phoenician theology. Now we have to understand that this El Elyon, El the Most High, which means El the Most High, is actually the one God. The idea of monotheism has really existed in Phoenicia. We can go back to 2,000 years BC, 3,000 years BC, and so forth. Now, the Egyptians, with the connection with the Phoenicians at the time of Thutmose the Third, when he arrived in Phoenicia, and especially meeting with the Enochian, a priest at Mount Carmel, he got the idea of the one God from them, and he took this idea to Egypt. But at the time, it was like an esoteric society, a secret teachings that had been given to the Egyptian priest by Thutmose the Third. It followed then by Akhenaton, who took this idea of the one God Aton, who is basically similar to the Phoenician god Adon or Adonis, and exercised a monotheism belief in Egypt. The Hebrew, we can safely say that they were not in existence at the time. According to my theory, I believe that the Persians, like the Assyrians before them, exercised a policy of transfer of population from a certain place to another place within the empire, within the Assyrian Empire or within the Persian Empire. So Cyrus II, in around 6th century BC, wrote the edict, transferred a group of people from Babylon and Ur of the Chaldeans into the land of Canaan. And these people, where they crossed the river, the Phoenicians called them Abiru al-Nahar, those who crossed the river, the Hebraniyin, the Hebrews. But that was later in history. So if you're going to focus about the idea of monotheism, it is purely a Phoenician Egyptian principle.
Well, that's what I think. There's one thing though that I really want to kind of address along this line, and that is Lady Asherah of the Sea or Our Lady of Byblos. In the most ancient Canaanite text that we have El is almost a Zeus-like character in the Ugarit, version of Phoenician mythology, and he rules with Lady Asherah of the Sea, and where does I know you mentioned several times, you mentioned Astarte and Asherah in Jesus the Phoenician in connection with Mary primarily, Jesus' mother. How do you equate? Do you equate El and his consort Lady Asherah as two halves of one entity, or do you conceive them, or do you put Lady Asherah in some other position? How do you handle that in the theology that you're suggesting?
The pantheon, the Phoenician pantheon, consisted first of the Father of all, which is El, I just told you about. Now, the second role, the second category of gods are the goddesses. The second category is the goddess Astarte, which is who is the escort of El, but she is of the second category of the deities that existed in the Phoenician pantheon, along with Anat and Ashirai and Astarte, and so all they do function as the mother goddess, as the queen of heaven, as the lady virgin Anat, and we have the third category of gods and deities. We have the sons of El, the Elohim, for example, Baal, Adonis, Yao, Shalim. Yao and Yam are the same deity of water. And we have the rest of the gods and the goddesses that appear in the Phoenician pantheon. But first of all, we have like a council. It's like a council of gods and goddesses presided by one god, father of all, is El.
Yeah, the pantheon that we're familiar with, of course, has Astarte as the daughter of, in a sense, the daughter of El. And,
exactly.
Yeah, right. She's the daughter of El, and of course, and she is in a way a sort of a later version of Anath. A more loving version. A more loving version of Anath. And Anath being a probably pretty ferocious virgin warrior goddess, as we know, but
not.
Yeah.
But excuse me, Poke. Not all the time Anath was pictured as a warrior. Sometimes we have in the Geographic tablet that God El asked Anath to spread love all over the earth, and to plant love and peace in the fields. So sometimes she was given the role of a warrior as a defender in that sense, and in other terms she was given the role of a protector, and she was given a role of finally making peace happen by spreading love and peace all over the earth. So this is the idea that we are concentrating on when we find the wisdom that existed back then. We don't know how many years back, but definitely thousands of years back. There was a wisdom, a certain kind of wisdom, an evolved system of theology in Phoenicia, and it was definitely became a most universal and most with the coming of Jesus as being the son of El himself.
Yeah, right. The thing that here in this country we have been ever since the 1960s, the late 60s, we've been trying to revive appreciation of the goddess, and mostly in European sense, but one of the innovations that my particular church did is that we decided to go back, and go back to the to the original roots, and start off. You remember I mentioned one time Jessie Weston's From Ritual to Romance, where she says the whole Holy Grail mythos all starts at Apaka up in the Lebanon, back when the river ran red with the blood of Adonis, and trace that all the way through. So that's what inspired us to recreate and to try to recreate to do a hermetic version of the ancient Canaanite seasonal ceremonies, and to try to bring this pantheon, this ancient pantheon, back to life. Of course, eventually this ancient pantheon, Baal and Astarte, eventually, through a whole series of evolutions, end up as Jesus and Mary in the end. That's the way it ends up, at least according to the Nicene document of the Hippolytus managed to preserve. But how do you feel about Jesus and Mary Magdalene? Do you think there's any possibility that they could have been a couple?
What I just want to thank you for resurrecting the Canaanite rituals that you're doing. What you're doing is just great, and I must admire that. It's very important to find that in the States today, in this age, somebody that is resuscitating, rejuvenating the energy of the ancients, and I must thank you for that. Now, concerning the question whether Jesus and Mary Magdalene had any relation whatsoever together as a couple, it's basically not a fundamental idea. It has no roots, this idea at all. The relation between Jesus, Yahushu, and Maryam, al-Majdal of Magdala, is a relation between a high priest, between a master, between a son of God and a daughter of God, and a teacher, a disciple. When in the Gospel of Philip, which Dan Brown actually used to promote his book, there is no actual understanding that such a kiss by Jesus given to Mary Magdalene was ever been a sexual kiss or of that sort. It was just a kiss. It could be on the forehead, it could be on the cheek, or even if it is on the mouth, it does not relate to any sexual relation or any, you know what I mean. It's just an initiation kiss from mouth to mouth. He has given her the breath of life. She is one of his biggest disciples. She is a priestess. We all know that Mary Magdalene is a Phoenician priestess. So basically, we're following that route of joining together all the Phoenician theology that has been studied and that has been practiced in Phoenicia and to a certain extent in Egypt in different names like Isis and Osiris and Horus at the time of Jesus. And it is very important to understand that what has been given, what has been practiced as a myth, the myth of Adonis, of Adon, being killed by the bear and resurrecting in April, and the death of the phoenix and resurrecting after 3 days, is basically the death of Jesus sacrificing himself on the altar of humanity, defending humanity in a way, and resurrecting in April, in the same month that Adonis resurrected thousands of years ago, and after 3 days, the same what has been done with the phoenix resurrecting after 3 days. So the connection is really interesting to understand.
Yeah, right. Well, let's kind of leave that where it's at. Although I'm perfectly okay with the idea that both Jesus and Mary Magdalene were both had probably both taken Nazarite type vows, and they could have very well had a celibate relationship. That's very, very possible. The reason why I asked the question is because Jesus, there seems to be a desire, especially with former Roman Catholics, to not see Mary to see Mary as the mother, but not as the consort, and of course. That does not fulfill the problem with that is it doesn't fulfill the Nicene theory that Isis and Osiris and Baal and Astarte and Venus and Adonis and all of these pagan gods and goddesses, they all end up eventually in the form of Jesus and whoever Jesus' consort would have been, and that's why I'm mentioning this, because Mary, even though it could have been a celibate, even though their relationship certainly could have been celibate, but that's why I wanted to know whether we could and whether you your idea of Jesus fulfilling the formula of the evolution of the dying gods, the way the dying gods and their consorts.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yes, and interestingly enough, as we do in Seven Gates every fall, the goddess comes down and resurrects the dying god, and anoints him, and resurrects him. And Mary Magdalene, of course, was one of the, she even in the Gospels, the regular Synoptic Gospel, she is the one who anoints Jesus after he's dead, and she takes care of him, and she's there at the cross, and so she's the first one to see him when he rises,
to witness his resurrection.
Yeah, so she is the
exactly. This has changed. What has been? That's what I'm telling you. I'm trying to say here that the religion have evolved from the idea of the female resurrecting the male 2,000, 3,000 years back to being just a companion at the time of the resurrection, because the power now is with the male to resurrect himself from death. So it's an evolution process of the theological system of the Phoenicians. Things have evolved 2,000 to 3,000 years, and the Virgin is definitely evolved from that time to the time of Jesus. So Maryam of Magdala played an important role as a priestess and as a witness of his resurrection, whereas he played the role of the resurrecting God. This a little bit differs from the ancient times, but stays with the same concept of the Son of God that dies and to save humanity and to resurrect after 3 days. The core concept remained the same.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move away from that, one of the things that I mentioned in the abstract here was that we were going to surprise people by informing them that there was no Nazareth in Jesus's time. They hadn't built it yet, and of course that you revealed that through your archaeological research, and Bethlehem was much more prominent in Galilee than it was in Judea, and so probably Bethlehem, especially if Joseph was a Galilean, and if Mary was also, that Bethlehem would be the. Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah. So talking about Nazareth was not there at the time of Jesus. It came later on. It's a name that derived from the word Nazarene or Nazarene or Nazarite. This name given to a certain group of people like Jesus, Yahushu, Yohanan, Mary Magdalene, and Paul, who decided to become the ascetic branch of consecrating themselves to God, to the work of God, being part of a bigger group called the Asayas. The Asayas, sometimes they are called the Asins, but the best name to call them is the Asayas, because the Asaya is Ashaya, or Asaya is a Syriac Phoenician name that means healer. And of course, definitely, these people were healers. The Qumran community that existed by River Jordan, these were Orthodox Jews, and has nothing to do with the group of Jesus and the surrounding region of Mount Carmel and Bethlehem of Galilee. And now, as we said, so Nazareth came later as a name and was derived from the name given to those people that consecrated themselves to God, and then Nazareth came as a village, as a place to where they used to practice their rituals and their prayers. As for Bethlehem, it's definitely the Bethlehem of Galilee, because the Bethlehem of Judea was not actually, it did not exist at the time of Jesus. It was just a cemetery at the time of Jesus, but it was later, in the 3rd or 4th century, at the time of the Roman Empire, when the Romans decided to have Christianity as their organized religion, was Constantine and his mother Helena. Then they invented the idea of Bethlehem in Judea, and somehow it seems that also, if you go back, look at the New Testament, many of the older scholars nowadays agree that Matthew had decided to shift the two Bethlehems, the Bethlehem of Galilee to make it the Bethlehem of Judea, because he addressed his gospel to the Jews at the time, trying to convince them that this Messiah, that this Yahushua Jesus is actually the Messiah that you have been waiting for here. He's been born in the Bethlehem that is related to King David, and this is all without any historical proof whatsoever. So Bethlehem in Galilee, go ahead.
I understand that that as far as the Davidian line, that most of the people most of the Judean people who could claim descent from David and of course Solomon, that from that line were left back in Babylon. They never came with Ezra and Zerubbabel, and they never never crossed the river. They stayed in Babylon, and so if Bethlehem and Judea was the city of David, maybe that was another one of Ezra's kind of redactions, to use the scholarly term for what Ezra did. He didn't change the Bible; he redacted it. Well, speaking of that, I think something I wanted to discuss with you was that you kind of get the impression that because we all know, including the scholars, all biblical scholars agree that Ezra redacted the Bible. He's the redactor. Okay, we all agree on that. But what I'm kind of wondering is that does not. I don't think that means. You give the impression that Ezra created that he invented the history of the Jews. I'm not sure that. What I want to ask you about is that the Samaritans, and there are about 800 of them left, they have a Torah that they claim is originally older than the one that Ezra was using, and they might be right, and although all we have is medieval type copies of it, but I think it's possible, and my colleague Michael Johnson, we both think that it's possible that Ezra took that original Torah that the Samaritans had, and he redacted that one and used that to recreate his version of the Old Testament. And what do you think of that Samaritan that theory?
You mean? I didn't follow you. What's the name of,
what I'm saying is that Ezra, rather than just inventing...
Ezra. Yes.
I know
okay,
Ezra. We know now, Karim. We know Ezra invented a lot of stuff, and he grabbed.
Yeah, exactly.
We know. You mentioned the Sargon Moses, the Sargon Moses connection, where Sargon was in the bulrushes and all that.
Exactly.
And you missed, of course, Manetho's version of the Exodus, which I was surprised that you missed that one. There's also another Egyptian story about a magician parting a lake to recover a lost bracelet for a pharaoh. That sounds very much like Moses parting the Red Sea. So we know that Ezra was very creative, and we know he partly borrowed Noah from the Babylonians, and
exactly.
The Noah story, and so a lot of this was, and then pieces of the Book of Enoch that he borrowed, and we know he borrowed all this stuff. But the Samaritans, they're in their version of the Torah, and they were, they were there when Ezra and his bunch with Zerubbabel, they came in. Here they found the Samaritans there practicing Judaism, and they hated them, of course. And then they made up this story about them being Kuthians, the cursed Kuthians, and they just turned the whole thing around and accused them of being Babylonian pagans. And what I'm saying is that it looks like that part of what Ezra used to create this hoax of his was the original Samaritan version of the Bible, and that's what I'm wondering. What your opinion on it is on that?
Yeah. I was just I'm following you exactly now. So we believe that the Old Testament, as I said before, is a compilation of many stories relating to Phoenician, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian. There's no doubt about that. Now, what happened is that at the time of Cyrus II, when the Persians controlled all the area of Egypt, they attacked Egypt and they conquered it, and all the land of Canaan and everything around, and Babylon it fell with the Persians. Now they controlled the whole area. So this Persian ruler or king Cyrus II decided to move people of Babylonian and Chaldeans from the city of Ur to the land of Canaan as part of his policy of transfer. When they had Egypt under their control and when they had Babylon under their control, so they started to formulate the Old Testament under the master mind of Ezra, who is known also as Esdras. He is a Persian scribe, and Nehemiah as well. Even the Old Testament mentions that Ezra is Esdras and Nehemiah are Persian scribes. So these people, they manipulated the whole history back then, and they decided to create something that is related to what we know as the biblical Israel. So they invented it. Judaism is not but a Persian propaganda to me. So they fixed everything all together, and they sent this group of people that is composed of priests and families to the land of Canaan. And it is true that is mentioned in the Old Testament that Cyrus II is the only non-Jew that has been given the title of the Messiah. We wonder about that. How Cyrus II, who is Persian, to get the title of the Messiah, which is a Jewish thing. So the idea is, and Cyrus II also commissioned the building of the temple of Zorobabel, which is known traditionally as the second temple of the Jews, but to me it's the first temple of this stock of humanity called the Ibraniyin, the Hebrews, or those who crossed the river. And part of the manipulation, they invented the story of Solomon based on Melchizedek, who consecrated Ur-Shalim, who consecrated the city of Shalim, that goes back to Shalim, the son of El, that consecrated Ur-Shalim to the son of God, Shalim. And the temple that was built before, and the city that was built before by the Jebusites, who were actually a Canaanite tribe, a Canaanite Amorite tribe. They built the city around 1500 BC, around 2000 actually, because we have records of the Egyptian mentioning Shalim in the 19th century BC. So it could be back then or a bit later, but it was Melchizedek who became the high priest of Shalim, of Shalim, who consecrated the temple to Shalim. So this temple that was known in the Phoenician territory in Jerusalem as the Temple of Shalim was manipulated by Ezra and Nehemiah and became the Temple of Shlomo, and which is the Temple of Solomon. So the whole concept of the Old Testament is definitely a propaganda, part of the Persian policy and politics during their expansion, the expansion of their empire all around the territories that has been actually mentioned as the promise of God to Abraham. So the promise of God to Abraham, if you look at the geography, you will find that it is the same spot, the same area that has been the expansion area of Cyrus II. So it is not the promise of God to Abraham, it's the promise of Cyrus to a group of people that has been living in Chaldea and Babylon and moved them to the promised land, which is the land of Canaan.
Let's talk about Solomon's Temple a little bit, because of course naturally that's very important to the Masonic tradition, but I got the impression from reading your both your books, the Phoenician Code and also the Jesus the Phoenician, that you were suggesting that actually what they were really talking about was the Temple of Melkart at Tyre. And
exactly.
There's a lot of similarity. Not only that, but as Ezra tells the story, Solomon goes to Hiram of Tyre and says, "I want to build a temple, and will you help me?" And Hiram says, "Yes, praise the Lord." Yeah, of course, naturally, the Lord Hiram's praising is El. So this whole thing. What I'm saying is, Karim, that even though Ezra may have written the Solomon story and used I think he may have used another Babylonian king as a model for it. But it backfired on him, because what he ends up doing is he ends up making Solomon into an Elohist, whether he wants to or not. It completely backfires on him, and because. Yeah, but still, Solomon's Temple. You're right. If it was there, it was probably Melchizedek's temple, and it was built by the Jebusites. And if it existed, and if it did, it probably looked very much like, I think the Kaaba down in Mecca is probably pretty close to model as to what it must have looked like originally. Now, how do you feel about that?
Well, we believe that the idea of the two pillars at the entrance door of the temple, this idea of the two pillars goes back to Sanchoniathon narration that was transported to us by Philo of Byblos and Eusebius, the early church father, the historian of the Roman Church. He mentioned the existence of the two pillars when Tyre was at the time under fire, and there was one guy who decided to move from the inland Tyre to the maritime Tyre, because at the time the Tyre was two places. There was the inland Tyre and the maritime Tyre. It was at the time of Alexander that the two Tyre became one. So back then, thousands of years ago, when the fire happened, so this person decided to cut a branch of tree, and he sailed to the maritime Tyre, and he built two pillars, one for the fire and one for the wind. So this is probably the first concept of a temple that is somehow resembles the temple of Baal Melkart in Tyre and the temple of Shalim, and later what has been called as the Temple of Solomon. And even we believe that Enoch himself, when he reached when he received the Kabbalah, the authentic Kabbalah, which from the word Kabbalah, accepting Kabbalah, accepted the tradition from the angels of God that their names, all their names ends with the suffix L, like Michael, Gabriel, and so forth. So they're all under the one king, the king of the gods, Elyon. It is very clear in the book of Enoch, and it goes very obvious with the line of Jesus later on. So Enoch, when he received his vision and his teachings from God, he decided to build a semi-circular temple, an open temple on Mount Hermon in Lebanon, and he built one pillar and another pillar around an altar. And these two pillars, as I said, represents also the fire and the water, and they also represents esoterically a very important idea. They represent the vine and the wheat, the bread and the wine. And it goes directly, we remember when we say this, we remember Melchizedek and his ritual of bread and wine that was actually practiced by Jesus later on. So this temple, this original temple that Jesus in the New Testament, he came to the temple and he said to them, "You made my house is a house of prayer, you made it a den of robbers." He was not at all relating relating to the Temple of Solomon, but he was correctly mentioning, and he was correctly telling them that you made the house of prayer, the house of Melchizedek, the house of Shalim, which is the son of El, because I am Emmanuel himself, I am El with us. You made this house a den of robbers. So the actual fact in the New Testament, there was definitely a great conflict between Jesus and his Assyrians friends and the Nazarenes, the Galilean people of Mount Carmel, and the Judeans, the Jews that existed in Jerusalem. A great conflict, different ministries, different gods, and that is very clear in the New Testament. So we follow the line that Yahushu, which is also known as May Yah Ad. Who is Yah? We have to understand that Yah is the Phoenician god of water mentioned in the Geographic tablet. And this Yah is the same as Yam, mentioned and worshipped on the Phoenician coastal cities. It's the god of water. With the Amorites, Yah entered Mesopotamia at the time of the Amorites, around 2,000 years BC, with Hammurabi, the father of the Amorites, and this Yah became known as Ea with the Mesopotamian. So later on, with the Chaldean at the Neo-Babylonian era in the 6th century, 7th century BC, this Ea, the same god of water, transformed into Iyawo. And this Iyawo is not anymore the god of water, is not anymore the god of healing, as it was at the time of the Phoenicians back then, and it is with Jesus, because he is also the healer. Yahushu Meyahu saves. Yeah. Meyahu heals, yeah. And so this Yah became known with the Chaldean as Yahweh, but it lost its principle of healing as being the god of water, and became a dual principle, a female and male god. This Yahweh became with the people who came from Babylon and Ur to the land of Canaan. They brought Yahweh with them, and they named it Yahweh, having Yod Heva, Kabbalistically are known as Yod Heva Yahweh, Adam and Eve. So the idea became like this with the Hebrews and in Judaism, that is totally different from the concept of the Phoenician idea of healing by water, of Yahweh being himself Yahushu, being himself Emmanuel, being himself Jesus. being himself the Son of God. The idea of Son of God itself does not exist in Judaism. In Judaism, they have only prophets. But the idea the idea of Son of God that is now here on earth, God himself to save, purely an Egyptian Phoenician idea.
Speaking of that, let me ask you. We know that Ezra and his and Nehemiah and that crew that they went through when they meddled with the Bible. They went through and put YHVH everywhere they could possibly put it, and attached it to L. Yeah, they did. But and then when they finally developed their Kabbalah, and their Kabbalah, of course, as I imagine you know, is derived from both the Samaritan Kabbalah and the Greek Kabbalah of Marcus especially, and when they finally developed their Kabbalah, they did a lot of very, very interesting gematria on YHVH, and some very impressive gematria on it. But I'm wondering. I know we have come up with a alternative tetragrammaton, and I'll tell you how that came about. I originally, being a Golden Daughter, I used YHVH because the Golden Dawn did, and we equated it with L. We fell into the same problem that the Samaritans had. They ended up having to use YHVH. But the Samaritans, every time they saw, when they were reading their version of the Torah, every time they would see YHVH, they would pronounce it Shema, and that's like Shemat, which is a form of tetragrammaton which we ended up using, and that's Sha Ma Ta, Shin Mem Lef Tau. And Tau, being the last letter in the alphabet, and equated with Saturn and Earth. So the reason why we switched over from using YHVH, just like the Samaritans were, because the Golden Dawn did. The reason why we switched over was I invited at their request, a bunch of Hasidim to one of our seasonals, and they all came, and we had a great time, and we went out to go around the henge, and we got out around the henge, and out the deacon came out to do a pentagram ritual, and when he vibrated, Yod Hey Wow Hey, that's when all of our Hasidim guests proceeded to march out, and we never saw them again. And at that point, I realized, hey, we've touched their God, and they think we stole it, and so I think we're going to stop using it. And so we decided, at that point, and it's proprietary with them, and so they don't like us using it. So I said, all right, that convinces me. We're going to use a more ancient tetragrammaton. And then, of course, later on we found out that the Samaritans were using Shema, and even though they put Yod Hey Wah in the book, but which now are we on to something here that you could relate to as far as a Phoenician tetragrammaton? What do you think?
Personally, I would prefer to use the word. The four letters of Elo. It is the name that Jesus, when he was on the cross, he called Eli Elo. He actually used this name, and he used a more different name, but the same thing. It's Abba, Abba, which means father. ABBA. But he used definitely the word on the cross because the cross actually represents initiation, death and resurrection. So at the time of his death and resurrection, Jesus called the Father Eloh. So this name Eloh is basically the name that I would use in such rituals. And there is something that is very important to know, that it's not what has been written in the New Testament, Eli, Eli, why have you forsaken me? This is totally an error of translating the words that actually was said by Jesus in Aramaic. He actually said, Eli, Elo, lama sabachthani, which means, Eli, Elo, how much have you praised me? Or in the Peshitta version, in the Aramaic Syriac version of the New Testament, it's for this moment you have spared me. You have spared me for this moment of absolute glorification. And if we read the great Gospel of John, this great book actually in the New Testament, a book of initiation par excellence, the book of John, the Gospel of John, he definitely mentions that all the scene that is happening around the crucifixion moment, and all this time, Jesus was talking to his Father, on one idea, the idea of glorification. The idea of glorification, which means death and resurrection. Right. And this is actually the third degree Masonry, the Master Mason resurrect on the third degree, which is mirroring the resurrection of Jesus after 3 days, and the resurrecting of the phoenix after 3 days from its ashes. It's the same idea. You know, Masonry is an important thing to study, an important fraternity that is somehow keeping the ancient tradition, but to a certain point, not all Masons are enlightened, and some of the Masons have taken this in a wrong way. But it is very important that Masons should go back to the original tradition, to the great white fraternity, that existed at the time of Melchizedek and Tutmosis III. So,
well, it's up to us to try to get them to do that, and
exactly.
We've been trying to do that, and we've had some success with it.
That's great.
And we'll continue. We'll continue. But now, before we run out of time here, I'd like to discuss your novel. You know, we sort of been discussing Jesus the Phoenician, and let's talk a little bit about the Phoenician Code, because this is a very exciting book, and I'm a James Brown fan. I enjoy his books. I don't always agree with them, just like I know you don't either. But then on the other hand, we have to admit that I'll give you a little clue. I don't know whether you know this or not, but Brown's guru was an American writer by the name of Dean Koontz. And Dean Koontz wrote a book, How to Write Best-Selling Fiction, and Dan Brown cut his teeth on that book. And finally, when he finally got to Da Vinci Code, he hit the formula. He hit the Dean Koontz formula perfectly. And you do very well with it using the same formula. I don't know whether you're deriving it from Brown or from Koontz, but yeah, you follow the same formula of the Phoenician Code. It's a very, very well constructed thriller. And talk a little bit about that, if you would. I appreciate our listeners need to know something about that book. So tell us about what you had in mind there and how you did it.
Yeah. It's basically it preceded the Jesus the Phoenician, which is the academic book of proving that Jesus was Phoenician, not Jew. The idea in the Phoenician Code is just to put a thriller in the case, divided into two sections. Which is part of it is just trying to prove that the biblical Israel is not as the Bible is telling us. There are no evidence for whatsoever, whoever, in this Old Testament. So, and the second part of it is trying to make the case for Jesus the Phoenician. So that was basically the idea, and I put it in a thriller just to make people read that, and two elementary points that I have been talking about, these two essential points, these two fundamental points that were later being given in more details in Jesus the Phoenician. But the Phoenician Code is basically trying to initiate somehow the Phoenician cult, the Phoenician tradition, that the Great White Fraternity tradition, the monotheistic principles, and doing the rituals in the Phoenician Code is coincides very well with Melchizedek and to a certain extent with the wisdom of the ages that existed at the time. Now, my only concern was in the book is I wanted to put the Templars in the story and to put the Freemasons in the story, which I did, and somehow considered some of them are not as good as they appear, and the other are much better, and which is a very important point to mention. To somehow resurrect the ancient traditions today, you have to understand how things back then, how it evolved. And why we are getting all this in the much tradition. Is it coming from the Great White Fraternity or the Babylonian Brotherhood, which I consider a deviated brotherhood from the original source? They deviated everything. They just falsified everything and corrupted everything. So what I'm trying to say in this initiation, I call it a story of initiation too, because it has a lot of meanings and a lot of symbols. Although it is a thriller, and but the main point is to get those people who understand really the tradition to go back into the tradition and hold back to it, because the truth is there, and the truth has been said like 2,000, 3,000 years ago, but it has taken many shapes and many forms, and some of the truth has been corrupted by the Babylonian Brotherhood. So at this age of revelation, because we believe that we are coming nearer and nearer to the age of revelation where all has to be revealed, where the truth is to be revealed. And I believe that your church is doing the same thing, and many other, like the Druses in Lebanon, are doing this, like some of the Templars that I know, like the Osti Order of Ordre Souverain du Temple Initiatique, who are doing some important work at revealing the truth. And your church, the Church of the Hermetic Sciences, I believe that it's now, we're coming now, we're moving from the individual consciousness into a collective consciousness, where we should, in a way, resurrect the phoenix again, resurrect the old tradition, and spread it to the world as it is, to make people understand the truth.
Well, right
That's
now,
my
this
point.
is the most important thing that we can possibly do, and I appreciate your. We all appreciate your work on this mission, because you're doing excellent work, and the books are excellent. We're just about out of time, and next week we'll be back with another one of our Paths on the Tree of Life series. Be Netzach next, Sphere of Nature next week, and Karim, thank you so much for being with us. And we'll see you Saturday night, and thank you, Sandy. Well, of course, we'll also see you Sunday afternoon when you do your lecture at Glendale Masonic Center. And thank you so much. Well, we're honored to have you, and we'll be seeing you soon. And take care and be well.
Thank you for having me talk on the show, and love and peace to all of you.
Love and peace to you, too. And good magic. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.